The Rick Bowness era is over in Dallas, Texas. He has stepped down as the head coach of the Dallas Stars. And on today's episode, we will talk about all of the implications of this move and what the future might hold for the Dallas Stars. We'll reflect on the time that Rick had as head coach in Dallas. And then, of course, we'll talk about why this is the correct decision for the franchise moving forward. All coming up on a jam-packed Monday episode of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars hockey, credentialed member of the Dallas Stars Media, coming to you on this Monday, May 23rd. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for stopping by and for making Locked On Stars your first listen every single day. Be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube as well as your favorite podcasting platform. You can also find me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis and our show on Twitter as well at Locked On Stars. But let's get into today's episode, taking a pause from our player season evaluation series and keeping in tune with offseason content. Though we had breaking news about the middle of the day on Friday that Rick Bowness would be stepping down and being relieved of his duties as the head coach of the Dallas Stars, a move that many people, including myself, we were anticipating this move happening. I know there was, even just murmurs, even, as late as this announcement, saying that there was kind of some rumors that the Stars could have been looking to make a coaching change at the All-Star break, which could just be a whole other rabbit trail for another day of what if, what happens if the Stars bring in, a different coach in the middle of the season? Do they make the playoffs? Are they still in the playoffs at this point? Whole different rabbit hole. But nonetheless, what has been heavily speculated for the majority of this season and the playoffs has finally become a reality. Rick Bowness is no longer the head coach of the Dallas Stars. He has stepped down from the role, as well as the removal of a few other coaches as well, including John Stevens, who oversaw the defensemen on the team. I think that is an interesting move, just given, the success of a few defensemen in Dallas, whether it's Klingberg, more recently, Miro Heiskanen, but even with guys like Yanni Hakanpää and Esa Lindell, who have come around within the past few seasons, or in Yanni Hakanpää's case, come around this season to becoming a pretty consistent, I think, top six defenseman, a guy that you could easily put in your rotation night in and night out and not have to worry about him being a liability. Todd Nelson, the press box coach, also being relieved of his duties as well. He's the eyes in the sky for the Dallas Stars, watching the games from up high, getting that different angle that coaches down on the bench, like Bowness, don't get every single night. And then, of course, Derek Laxdal, the power play coach. And this is another guy that I think a lot of people expected to be gone in the offseason for this Dallas Stars team, just given how horrendous the power play was for this team the back half of the season and in the playoffs. I mean, who knows if the Stars would still be playing if they could get a few more power play goals in the latter stages of the regular season as well as the playoffs, just with how much goals were at a premium in that series with the Calgary Flames. A few more power play looks and a few more power play successes could have been a huge difference for the Dallas Stars. So Rick Bowness, John Stevens, Todd Nelson, and Derek Laxdal all out, all removed from their positions within the Dallas Stars organization. But the Stars are keeping, we do know, at least two big coaching names within the franchise. Kelly Forbes, the video coach, will be staying with the team. And then a big one, Jeff Reese, the goalie coach, which I think makes a ton of sense, given that the Dallas Stars had the best goalie in the first round of the NHL playoffs. A guy that has, in Jake Ottinger, and then obviously with, previous other goalies on the team as well, whether that's been Bishop, Anton Hudobin, whether it's Braden Holtby. The Dallas Stars historically having pretty good goaltending, but makes sense to keep Jeff Reese around, especially after the juggling act he had to do this season with what started out with an array of strong goaltenders and then kind of turned into a weird, oh, these weren't the guys I was expecting to have on my team in Ottinger and Scott Wedgwood. And I forgot to list his name. Even though his stint with the Stars has been brief, Scott Wedgwood has done a fantastic job. And I think part of that is due to the credit of Jeff Reese being the goalie coach. But I think this is a very expected move, that there was going to be a lot of movement within this franchise in the offseason with Bowness. But I think even guys like Laxdell and a few other assistant coaches, it was only a matter of time before they probably were released, fired, let go, whatever you want to call it. So none of these too shocking. Whenever news was first breaking, I thought it said all the assistant coaches, and I was like, why would you get rid of the goalie coach? There was nothing wrong with the goalie performances. And I do think that, like I said, the John Stevens removal is also an interesting one, just with how the defenseman and the defense in general has been in Dallas over the past few seasons. It's been pretty solid. But of course, maybe with a new head coach comes a new system, and we will get a team maybe that's more focused on offense. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show and probably a little bit later on this week. But the Dallas Stars and Jim Nill essentially just hitting the reset button on the entire coaching staff, which I think is the right call. And I think many other people will agree with that as well. And of course, none of this is, ill will towards Rick Bowness or the other coaches as well. It seems like the reaction has been, hey, best of luck to you wherever you go next. Thank you for all you did for this franchise, for this city, and getting the Dallas Stars back to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2020. But at the same time, the NHL is a business. The world of sports is a business, and it was just time for especially Bowness, I think, to be moved somewhere else. And obviously, he has said that his coaching career is not over, so it's likely that he could be the head coach for a team somewhere else in the NHL next season, and the Stars could be seeing him on the other side of the bench and going toe-to-toe with whatever team he might be coaching. So I think it's one of those things where, as fans, we're glad for something new to be coming our way. But at the same time, Rick Bowness as a person, no ill feelings toward him. It's just kind of something that had to happen for the good of this franchise and for the good of this team. And I think the Stars are just avoiding future pain here. I think that it could have been easy for the front office to say, well, okay, I mean, Rick Bowness got us to the Cup Finals in 2020, and he coached us to overtime of a Game 7 against a really good Calgary team, so maybe we extend him another year or two. But the way I see that playing out is similar to what we've seen pretty much within the past few years, either barely making the playoffs or just barely missing out on the playoffs. And even if we do get there, we get eliminated in round one in a 6-7 game series, or maybe squeak out a first round series win, but then maybe get swept by a really good team in the second round. And so I think that the Stars are maybe moving forward a little bit quicker than anticipated, depending on who they get to be the replacement coach. I think the Stars could be in a really interesting position. I wouldn't say that they're going into full rebuild mode, but I do think it's fair to say that the Stars will likely not be in a cup window over the next few seasons, but getting a new head coach to that if assuming it's the right hire, whenever they do announce who this new coach will be, could be a big step forward in getting the Stars back to consistent Stanley Cup Finals contention. But we are going to continue to talk about Rick Bowness. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about his time in Dallas and the success that he brought to this Stars franchise in just a couple seasons that he was the head coach of this Dallas Stars team. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by Athletic Greens and their product, AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. Tons of people take some kind of multivitamin, and it's important to choose one with high-quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. AG1 is a small micro habit with big benefits. It's one thing you can do every single day to take great care of yourself. It costs you less than $3 a day, and you're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than any other cold brew habit or something that's unhealthy for you that you might use to get yourself going in the morning. It's cheaper than getting all the different supplements yourself, and you're investing in an all-in-one nutritional Insurance. To make it easy, Athletic Greens will send you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And we're moving on this Monday episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. Thank you guys for tuning into the show, for stopping by, getting your week started off right with Locked On Stars. This is your host, Dane Lewis here. You can find me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. You can also find our show on Twitter as well at Locked On Stars. Thank you again for tuning into Locked On Stars and for getting the latest news on this Rick Bowness situation. I know news broke on Friday, and with going into the weekend, obviously plenty of articles and plenty of talking points on social media about this move by the Stars. Again, not a whole lot of shock. If anything, the shock is that it didn't happen sooner into the offseason. I mean, just a little bit of time. I mean, I'm recording this late Sunday night, probably literally lining up with recording the episode after Game 7 last week. And so it's been about exactly a week since the Stars season ended. I guess I just wanted to give time, a little bit of time to breathe, and maybe for the coaching staff who probably knew that they would be moving on to maybe get some proper goodbyes in. Because at the end of the day, I think that, there was some good chemistry within this Dallas Stars locker room, and that extends to the coaching staff and the players as well, with how long some of these coaches and players have been a part of this organization. It's just one of those things where, you probably allow for them to kind of get their final goodbyes in, because who knows where the next steps will lead for these coaches, as well as some of the players on this roster who could potentially be on the move this offseason as well. But taking a look specifically at Rick Bowness, the ending of his tenure, obviously a little bit less than desirable, I'm sure, for him as well. But if you look at it, I mean, and he was under a lot of criticism, as most head coaches are in professional sports. He did do a lot of good for this team in a pretty short amount of time, and with a pretty tough hand dealt to him at the start of his time as head coach of the Dallas Stars. I mean, he took over this team in a pretty good position and in a pretty weird situation in the middle of the 2019-2020 season. You want to talk about a surprise move. I mean, Jim Montgomery getting fired in December of 2019 just took Dallas and the NHL world by surprise, because it was very vague. And even still to this day, I know I'm not fully aware of all the details. I know a lot of unprofessional conduct was the reason of his firing, but not really anything I delved too deep into. Even just at that time, it's obviously something that's really none of my business. I just knew that he was fired, and they brought up this guy named Rick Bowness to be the interim head coach. And, obviously the Stars were having a pretty good year up to that point. They did have a pretty bad losing skid going into the COVID pause, but then things picked up in the bubble, and Rick Bowness, against all odds, led that team to the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, they got to Game 6 of that series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, it's hard to say that he alone led them. Obviously, there were some fantastic performances from a lot of the players, but he was the coach that was having to lead that charge. And, if you go back and watch a lot of that footage that was shot of the bubble, I mean, you'll just see him talking about sacrificing and playing together as a team and playing for something greater than themselves. And I think there was a true bond, a fantastic bond within that group of guys in that locker room. Because, I mean, they have to look to Rick Bowness, because there was no one else in that bubble besides them and the other teams. But even then, you're not seeing those other teams or other people unless you're playing them. It's just you and your teammates and your coaching staff. And so Rick Bowness had to be there for those guys to lead them on the ice, but also off the ice, to help keep them refreshed mentally. And that just cannot be an easy thing to do in a very just unprecedented time in this world. Against all odds, Rick Bowness able to be the coach and lead his team almost to NHL greatness and NHL immortality. And what a run that was. And then, it didn't get much easier after that. I mean, he had to lead his team into, one of the toughest NHL seasons in the 2021 season. I mean, the condensed schedule, the amount of injuries on that roster, having to bring guys up from the AHL. There was still some good that season. We obviously saw the emergence of guys like Jake Ottinger and Jason Robertson, and even guys that kind of spent a lot of time at the AHL this past year with Ty Dellandrea, Brett Gardner, guys like that getting some time on the ice at the NHL level. Rick Bowness having to navigate all that, as well as COVID, as well as ice storms shutting down and canceling games, and having to deal with what was one of the more difficult divisions with all the realigned divisions. I mean, Nashville was in that division. They were a good team. Carolina was really good. I mean, the Tampa Bay Lightning, for crying out loud, were in that division. The Florida Panthers, just a gauntlet of a division to have to be in. And the Stars still hung tough and still almost made the postseason against all odds. And then, of course, we all know this year, I mean, this was another tough season as well with the weird COVID pods. Again, a pretty tough division. The Central, I don't know if we can say it is the toughest division, because some of the divisions out east were really top heavy and really good. But you want to talk about top to bottom. I think you could make an argument that the Central is the best division in the NHL this past year, with sending 5 teams to the postseason. That was the most out of any of the divisions in the league. And he gets his team there as the first wildcard spot, and they go all the way to overtime in Game 7 against a really good Calgary Flame team. And yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to say. 3 seasons, or kind of 2.5 seasons as head coach of this Stars team. Again, that's a really short time to be the head coach, but still not a whole lot of, really, really bad. And he hit some big milestones then. I mean, he crossed the 2,500 games coach threshold this past season. I believe it was in late November. I think that is the most games spent behind an NHL bench as a coach, as an assistant, and a head coach ever. Just absolutely insane. I think that's around 40 years of coaching experience in this league. And I think obviously a lot of that coaching experience plays into why he was so successful in the bubble, and why he was just prepared for so much adversity. Obviously, he had never seen a worldwide pandemic where everything was shut down. But you coach in the National Hockey League for that long, you're going to have seen a thing or two, and you're going to know how to handle adversity, how to navigate adversity, while also trying to propel your guys to greatness. And I think we saw that several times throughout the Bowness tenure, because he coaches with so much passion. And I think maybe that was part of the reason why fans maybe sometimes didn't like him, is because he was stubborn and set in his ways and very passionate about what he believed. But I think more often than not, the guys in that locker room bought into it. I mean, you go back and watch that documentary footage from the bubble, and you see the passion that he speaks with in that locker room, and you can see the guys buying into it in the room, but also out on the ice. And it was just admirable. I mean, regardless of how you agreed or disagreed with his coaching style or the style of play he implemented, you can't say that he didn't have passion, that he, did not want to win, because you could see he very much wanted to win. He very much wants to be successful wherever he's coaching at. He just expects a lot out of his guys. And I think, again, it's just one of those things where he obviously has been coaching for a long time. So some of his ideals and systems may be a little bit old school, and you have a lot of really young talent on this Stars roster. And I just don't think that they mixed well. I think that Bowness could go off somewhere else and coach a different team with different personnel and maybe have a lot of success. And the Stars can bring in a new coach that can be more in tune with some of this younger offensive talent, and they can be successful. I don't think it was a bad mix because of, bad personalities or bad blood, or just a lot of tempers. I think it was just a system and personnel issue more than anything. And so that's the other thing you have to talk about when it comes to bad blood, or beef, if you will, within the organization or locker room. If there ever was any of that, I feel like it was kept pretty low key. I mean, Bowness, you do have to say, really never had any nagging issues as head coach. He was always respectful to the media, always respectful to the people that he spoke to, and seemed to respect his players as well for the most part. I mean, never really in the news for anything bad. It's about all you can ask for your head coach to be, coaching a team and having to navigate all these personalities and coach and manage that, but also be a stand-up man that treats everyone with respect, both within his organization, but also off the ice and out of the organization as well. And I think Rick Bowness did an excellent job of exemplifying good character in the NHL, in a world where, sometimes sports fixtures and sports figures can let us down. And not to say Rick Bowness is perfect, but, I think he did a pretty good job being in the position that he was in. But coming up next, we will continue to talk about this whole situation. And while Rick Bowness did have success, and while he did do some good things here in Dallas, we will talk about officially and in depth why letting him go was the correct move. All of it coming up after another quick break. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is also brought to you by BetOnline. Our partners at betonline.net continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. The Dallas Mavericks may be down 0-3 to the Golden State Warriors, but they're coming back, and you can bet on that if you believe like me. By the way, you heard it here first. The Dallas Mavericks will be the first team in NBA history to overcome a 3-0 deficit. Calling it now. And if you want to be bold and put some money on that, you can do so at betonline.net. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. All right, let's close out today's episode of Locked On Stars. This jam-packed Monday, a little bit of chaos going into this Monday, talking about the future of the Stars franchise. Hopefully soon we'll be talking about a new head coaching hire. I know that the search is already on. Jim Nill said after Rick Bowness stepped down from his role as head coach, he said that the search for a new leader has already begun. And so hopefully sooner rather than later, we will be talking about who that is and the implications of that going forward. But right now, we're still talking about Bowness's departure and why this is ultimately the right move for this franchise. And we talked about it a little bit earlier in the first segment, how I think the Stars are avoiding some years of pain by letting him go now instead of delaying the inevitable and extending him for maybe a season or two longer. I think this is the right move, and it was the right time to do it. And, I think most of the fan base, if not all of the fan base, is on board with this move. And, obviously we're hoping the best for Rick in his future endeavors as a person. And maybe if it's retirement, we hope he has a happy retirement, just because he has been doing this for so long. But again, shows no sign of wanting to slow down. But it is time for new leadership with this new age, this seemingly kind of new era of Dallas Stars hockey coming around the corner sooner rather than later. And it would be incredible to see what guys like Jason Robertson or Rupe Hintz could do with a new offensive-minded coach and an offense-friendly system. I mean, the Stars' identity for the past several seasons has been defense, 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 and sometimes that's been a good thing, and the defense has done wonders for this team and for this franchise at times, but at the expense of the offense suffering. And, we've seen it so many times in the postseason where the Stars get so far, they can only ride their strong goaltending or their strong defense so far before their offense just falls off and doesn't give them any support. And of course, you have to put all three of those things together if you want to have a successful hockey team that can win a Stanley Cup. And the Stars need to find a way to do that because the talent is there with the defensemen. We still don't know if the Stars will be able to continue to keep John Klingberg, but Miro Heiskanen is the guy that's going to be with this team for a while. I think Yanni Hakanpää could have a really good future with this organization. And of course, the Stars have drafted pretty well in recent years. And so you can, of course, bring in maybe another really talented defenseman, either this draft or in the next draft as well. Or, of course, always test the markets with free agency, continue to lean into that defensive side, and continue to obviously build up really great goaltending like we've seen with Jake Ottinger. But we saw Rupe Hintz and Jason Robertson and Joe Pavelski. All three have their best statistical years in a defensive system, and they all played fantastic. But can you imagine how good that top line could be if it was in an offensive friendly system, a system like we've seen like the Colorado Avalanche play or the Florida Panthers in the regular season, not the Florida Panthers in round 2 of the playoffs, because they just refused to score more than one goal against Tampa Bay, which from experience, not the right way to go about things against the Tampa Bay Lightning, but I digress there. But yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about how good that top line was for the Stars this season under this Rick Bowness system. If it's a system that is more offensive friendly and allows more spacing and more opportunities for that top line, as well as some of the other offensive forwards on this team, I mean, this Stars team could become a whole new level of dangerous and lethal. There's just too much talent on this team right now. And of course, even at the prospect level, for the Stars to maybe bring in another defensive-minded head coach that runs a little bit of an outdated, old-school system. It would just be foolish of the front office to do that. And so I think offense somewhat needs to be one of the primary focuses when looking for a new head coach of the Dallas Stars, just because I think that's where the potential truly lies with this team. And then, of course, obviously, we're still keeping the same coach for goaltending. Jake Ottinger will still be around. Miro Heiskanen will still be around, but we got to find a way to get Robo and Rope Hintz up to the next level of play, like we talked about in their player evaluation episodes. And, there's all this talk and speculation about which guy will be coming in for the Dallas Stars. And we'll do an episode later this week highlighting some potential candidates that I think would be really good fits. But I want to hear from you guys as well. You can tweet at me on Twitter. You can also, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment who you would want to see as the next head coach of the Dallas Stars. Of course, Pete DeBoer just got fired from the Vegas Golden Knights. He's on the market at the time of recording this. Barry Trotz from the New York Islanders still on the market as well. I mean, I'm recording this on Sunday night, but of course, crazy things can happen and people can get hired or taken off the market in the blink of an eye. So again, at the time of recording this, those guys are available. And then another name, of course, Rick Tocchet, who's been on the TNT, the NHL on TNT crew this season, but also has coaching history with Arizona, Tampa Bay, you name it. So those are just a few names that I've seen being circulated around. Those are obviously some really big names who have a ton of NHL coaching experience, but the Stars could also fly under the radar like they did with Jim Montgomery when he was hired and get a guy that maybe doesn't have a whole lot of NHL coaching experience. So again, let me know in the comments down below if you have any thoughts on what the future of the Dallas Stars should look like as far as a head coach, because I'm curious to hear what the rest of Stars Nation thinks about this, because I think it's a truly important topic. And the wrong hire could lead to some disaster for this franchise years down the road. And the right hire could mean really, really great success for this franchise down the road. So it's a huge decision. And I'd like to know what the rest of Stars fans and, again, Stars Nation thinks would be the correct move for this franchise. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you again for making us your first listen of the day. Make your second listen of the day the Locked On NHL podcast. From first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast at. Be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube as well as your favorite podcasting platform. You can leave a comment, a rating, or a review if you like what you hear. You can also find and follow me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis and our show as well at Locked On Stars. But we'll be back here tomorrow, Stars fans, cranking out more off-season content, doing more player evaluations. We'll be talking about head coach prospects here later on this week. You're going to want to keep it dialed in here to Locked On Stars all throughout the summer to get the latest news and insight and my takes on everything that happens with this franchise in the offseason leading up to training camp. But we will see you back here tomorrow, Stars fans. Have a great Monday.